Thank you so much for taking your time to. It's really late. Like I said, I feel so bad, but thank you so much for taking your time to have this interview. Before we begin, before we jump right into the questions, do you want to take some time to introduce yourself to the audience for those who are not maybe familiar with your work? Just tell us a bit about yourself and your artistic journey.
Firstly, thank you so much for having me and taking the time to do this. I feel like it's a big honor as well. And thank you so much. And sure, a little bit about myself is that I've been in the animation and art industry for a little time now. I did my college in India, where I am based. And I then worked at Disney for about 3 years in the animation department. After that, I left and co founded my own studio called Studio Sideline, where we do a lot of projects that you can see online as well. And I also do a lot of work on social media, which has probably led me to this interview here, which I am very excited for. And in general, I'm just the guy who loves making art and loves talking about art all the time. So, yeah, an interview is always exciting. And it's a pleasure to meet anyone, everyone who's watching this. Thank you also for taking the time.
Of course, like that's a lovely. I wanted to ask about your background as an artist, like growing up as an artist, your inspirations. When did you realize that okay, this is what I want to do? I want to do art, or was it like something that you weren't sure that was gonna be possible, and then, or was it something like you're like, no, it's this, it has to be this. Like, just tell us a bit about that.
So I've been drawing a long time, like from the age of 4. It was actually a way that my mom would keep me busy when we used to go for church service on Sunday. I used to have a lot of distractions. So every time I was there, she'd give me a notebook and a pen, and I'd just be drawing all the time. So that once people started looking at it and being like, oh wow, you're talented, you're good. I think I got the, positive affirmation to continue doing this as a hobby on the side. But I never really thought that there would be a possibility to turn it into a career until much later on. It was always a hobby, especially where I come from, which is India. Art is not seen as a viable career path. There are other career paths where the general public pushes the youth to go into because that is seen as more of a successful path. So, as an artist, we have the big starving artist trope over here. So, there was no immediate surrounding of a career path for me, right? So, I always just kept drawing for the fun of it. Then when I finally got into an art college, I thought, okay, no, there's no plan B. I just want only a plan A. So I just went all in into an art college, and even then I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I used to be a charcoal artist where I used to just draw a charcoal and I used to draw portraits of celebrities. I think that is something that a lot of artists start with the artists of the class. They sketch like things that are easily recognizable, and that kind of defines how good as an artist they are or not. So I went in as a charcoal artist, and then I learned about digital art. I tried it, I failed to give up. I became a 3D artist. I worked as a car designer. I worked as a 3D modeler all throughout college. Then I worked as a graphic designer. I had a long journey trying and testing different things. So I did graphic design for TEDx, I did graphic design for other brands. And then eventually I just was like, I want to get back to digital painting. So I drew a lot, and that got me into an interview with Disney, like digital art. And that's when I started my animation career. I actually didn't animate much before getting into Disney, so it's quite ironic. But I think they saw a lot of work that I'd done and a lot of like just the amount of volume. So they're like, okay, this person will be a good addition to the team. I'm extremely blessed. I would say that. So then I started animating after that, and that led to another thing which got me here. But overall, it was a lot of trial and error. I was always interested in art, and around the time I was like 17, 18, I was like, that I don't have any other option. I have to make a career out of this because I can't do anything else. So I only truly loved art. So I went all in on it. There was no backing down. So yeah.
Wow, I love that. I think that's so inspiring. I can relate because I'm from Nigeria. I'm based in Canada right now, but I'm from Nigeria. And it's pretty much the same thing over there, right? It's like the starving artist. No one kind of understands. Like having to explain what I'm doing right now to my distant relatives is like, ugh, like they're not gonna get it, right? So it's, I love that. I love that, artists like you are sharing your stories for maybe other artists who are in countries that don't have the same opportunities and feel like this is impossible. They see you, they see other artists that were in similar situations but still were able to overcome that cliche, that trope, and become successful artists. And that can be very inspiring because like you said, there was only a plan A, right? Like the fact that you kept trying. You even tried. You weren't sure exactly what this was gonna lead to, but you did this and that. And I think that passion, like you said, you didn't have any experience in animating, but I think what landed you that job at Disney wasn't the experience. It was the passion that they saw through your like past projects, and that was like, okay, this guy has what it takes to do this as a job. And I love that. I think that's such an inspiring story. This is why I love interviewing artists, because like not only does it inspire me to hear the stories, I know there's someone out there watching this interview who's gonna be like so inspired after hearing that. So yeah, lovely, lovely background. I love that. Moving on to the next questions, let's talk about your inspirations in particular. You can tell us about your inspirations as a child and your current inspirations, and how you channel that into your art, how you channel that into your creative process.
So my inspirations change all the time, but I think some core things that will always be there with me are the things I grew up watching and surrounding myself with. For me, thankfully, I had some anime that used to play on air. So I had the original things like Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, Pokemon, and those just blew up my mind thinking, wow, these things exist, these worlds exist. And as a kid, you get inspired by almost everything you see, right? Everything you consume. So I used to wait for like 4:30 p.m. or 5 p.m. watch the show. I had to do my homework first before that. My mom was very strict, so I had to watch it. Then I get 1 hour of TV time, and then I also had to fight with my sisters on TV time. So, uh, yeah, and it was not like Netflix and all that we have now that you can just stream, right? So every day one episode will play. So I would watch the episode, then I'd go and I'd draw all of that, and I'd try and imagine what would happen next in the episode. I'll be like this because again, we didn't access the internet to see the plot, all of that. So you had to wait and then wait every day or weeks for the next thing. So I used to watch a lot of cartoons, a lot of anime, a lot of movies. Once a week, I was allowed to rent one movie. So I could rent from the local DVD guy, and I'd always rent an animated movie so that I could watch once a week. So that was also there. Those all played a big role. So I used to watch the whatever album cover had like an animated thing on it, I would watch it. So I'd watch a lot of Disney, a lot of uh, Ghibli as well. And I actually grew up watching that, which has played a big, big role because that was like, okay, these things, what you can draw, you can bring to life, and you can put out your imagination. And it's kind of like kids playing with toys, that I get to do that as a career. So that eventually grew up into what it is now. And now I get inspired by a lot of other artists I see, much like myself, who are like way ahead of me. Like there are so many from Ramon Nunez, there's Zach Retz, there are other people like Pascal Campion Art, there is Noish. A lot of these artists I see on social media, and I'm like, wow, like it's amazing. So currently, my inspirations are still, of course, movies, entertainment that comes out, and a lot of artists that I just can refresh my Instagram feed and feel inspired, or my Pinterest. So that's how it is now. Right now, it's just like other artists that I look up to. I feel like they are like. There's always that wow factor, like how do I get there? So I love it. I love the journey for sure.
It's a beautiful journey, like yeah, seeing artists that every time whenever I feel like I'm stuck, sometimes it just takes, like you said, refresh Pinterest or Instagram, and you see all these amazing people making amazing art, and you're just like, wow. I think even as a kid, like watching the animated movies, it's definitely the wow factor. Like, how is this possible? I want to do that. I want to tell stories too. And it's just beautiful how, like, from day one, it's always just artists inspiring other artists. Because even the animations we watch, it's like artists working behind that. So even though you might not know them particularly by name, it's still their work. You're like fantasizing over, like, wow, this is beautiful. I want to do that. And yeah, I think it's such I just love the community. I love the fact of like how art inspires art. And that's why I feel like no matter what situation we're in, art is never going to die, because artists will continue to inspire artists, art will continue to inspire art, and that's just about it. Lovely. Okay, so the next question, I wanted to talk more about your workflow. Like I mentioned already in the beginning, you share your workflow online for the internet, like you share a lot of your process, but maybe for those who are not familiar, can you just kind of give us a general, vague, step by step process of like how you take that inspiration into an idea into a final piece?
Yeah. So I think the workflows are a bit different for when it comes to like client work, where there are settings in place. So I'll talk more about my personal stuff that I do completely for fun and the stuff that you see on
You
Instagram.
can share a bit of both. You can share like your client work and then your personal work, because it's, I think both are very informative. Maybe for people who want to land a job in the industry, that would be a very good, insightful like information. And for maybe people just like, I just want to make illustrations that look like his. You can share that as well. So yeah.
Okay, for sure. So when it comes to the client work, since I am part of a studio, we have like a set workflow that we've actually adopted and learned from our predecessors, like my time at Disney and so on. So the client work revolves heavily on pleasing the client with the end product. So for that, we use anything and everything available to get to that end product, which means things for example, if the client gives us color references, we will color pick those references and use it, which is very different from personal art where we want to explore and come up with our own colors, all of that. So that is like the set defining factor. But client product, I mean, sorry, client projects is when there are
Bless you.
set workflows where, okay, I'll give you an example of, say, an illustration project. So they give you a theme, and we probably make 3 or 4 rough iterations in a sketch and give it back to them in a basic black and white sketch. These are called thumbnail sketches, just to show them the idea. And after that, after approval, we take one of those forward if it's a single illustration, and we do a color draft. Now, after the color draft, we also can show a variation or two. But if the client has given us references before that, being like, I needed at this sunset setting, I wanted this kind, I want these colors, I wanted to pop more, all of that, then usually it's just fewer drafts of there. Once we get the color draft, we can then take it to a final stage and do another pass of taking to the next stage. Then there's a final draft where they can give us like lesser and lesser changes at each stage. So usually when it's the rough stage, they can change almost everything. When it's the rough art, when you're adding color, they can maybe change like 50% of it because the sketch is already approved, so just the colors. And after that stage, they usually change not more than 10% of anything, being like, okay, this works for the brand better. Can you make him angrier? Can you make him happier? Or can you change the lighting a bit, make it brighter, or just adjust the colors? So that's how it goes for an illustration. The same goes for animation. There's a rough sketch phase, which is like a storyboard, we call it. It's just rough sketches in a sequence that we play on a timeline. So that is also either called a storyboard or an animatic, as if we play it on a timeline. Then we have like a color draft as well, just to show test frames, color keys, as we call it, just keyframes of that. And then we move on to like the animation has a few more stages where there's a rough animation, then there's a tie down phase to make them look like the characters. So the rough animation could be almost stick figures. Then there's a tie down phase to turn that stick figure into the character that they want. Okay, then it's the final colors and the background painting, and then another stage called the compositing where we make everything look amazing. Okay, so that's like we match the foreground with the background, and that's After Effects magic and make it look amazing. That's it. So it's very different when it comes to personal art. So personal art is all about me, myself, and also what I want to put out.
Of
And
course.
yeah, and because I'm also putting out stuff on social media, I also think about little more about what other people might like to see as well. Because if I'm having a bad day, I just draw chaos. I'm not gonna put that up. I don't want anyone else to have a bad day as well. So for me, it's kind of like finding a balance where something I love and something maybe someone else might like. I put that together, and these are how I come up with ideas. First way is either through my experiences. So I always like going out and doing more things. So it gives me more experiences that I can put into my work as well. Like, for example, I now went on a vacation trip this last weekend. So I went to a beach, and now I'm completely inspired by that. The sunset, the water, the sand. So my upcoming artworks, we will probably have that into it. Then I usually collect reference images, unless it's directly from my head, to help me bring that artwork to life. So here's where sites like Pinterest, ArtStation, I think comes into play. Where if I'm thinking like a beat scene, and I can't visualize exactly the colors I want in my head, then I look up for something on Pinterest and look up for things that are on beaches and all, so that it helps me, add as much context, storytelling, and accuracy to the piece. And then I go ahead, I don't make any rough sketches, and I go with the final painting because this is the way I love expressing myself. Like when I make too many sketches and drawing, it becomes too structured for me, which a lot of artists do, and I love seeing it. But for me, I like the raw nature of just going directly with colors and painting, especially when it's personal art. For client work, I go like make a rough sketch, get that approved and all that. For personal work, it's all about just raw feeling, throwing in colors, distorting, all that stuff here. So that's how it usually comes. So
I love that. Oh wow, it's so interesting to see like the differences. It's the same thing, right? You know, most people, especially like artists who haven't really worked in the industry, they might not really understand what the process is. They know they want to work in the industry, but they don't really get that it's kind of like a pipeline, right? Like you really explain the entire structure, and I'm sure there are people out there that are like, wow, there's a lot of like steps, you know, a lot of back and forth. It's not the same as just like drawing in your room and be like, here's a pretty picture, right? Which is very different from personal work. But I love that. It's also very interesting to see how your personal work, like you said, in the client work, it's more structured, right? And in your personal work, it's all about like just expression, and like we can obviously see that in your process. It's just about like the feeling, and I, you know, it's interesting because like that's the duality of like arts and a, only really skilled artists are able to like adapt to like different processes and styles, and that's why it's important to like keep practicing and keep improving and just keep moving and understand that like in this journey you're always learning and you always have to like learn new techniques and you can be malleable and stuff. I love hearing about the process of artists. It's so like I learn something new every time, so thank you so much for sharing. Okay, we can move on to the book right now. You contributed to 3D Total's quick and simple painting in Procreate, like the Procreate guide, which I have one of the books and it's really helpful. I love books and tutorials that like, or like books that are like step by step processes, because I think there are different ways to like learn art, but step by step processes, I mean, you know, atelier formats existed since long time ago, like looking at someone's process step by step and trying to follow along that person, because it's like shadowing, right? I think that's the concept where you just directly follow someone and see how they work and copy that and learn from that. There's so much that can be learned from just like, you know, doing something the way someone else does it. So I love that Procreate has this series. 3D Total has this series of like books where artists can, you know, follow along the process of other artists. So can you share a bit about your contribution in this book? Like what, like, just tell us a bit about your personal contribution.
sure. So I was super excited to get the opportunity from 3D Total to do this because I have a lot of copies of their books in my bookshelf already from earlier versions and everything. So it was like, wow, this is my I made it as an artist moment. So
I made it as an artist.
yeah, I was super excited about it. So what I wanted to do was give as much value as I could to the audience. So, and I thought that the some of my most popular artworks that I've put up online tend to be cityscapes. And I find that people find things like cities and buildings and all quite complicated to draw. Because, for example, if you draw like a tree and you draw it 50% off, it still looks like a tree because it's very organic. But when you draw things which have symmetry and perspective, like buildings, and you mess it up, it's very apparent. So I wanted to show people that there are easy ways to do it, and I wanted to make it look as complex as possible, but give it the easiest way to get there. So what I did was I showed how to make a city with just a few layers and bring about a lot of depth and light to it just by using lighting and little fog. That's it. So that's what I did. And I also showed people how to add in a character and match the character to the background as well. So they can put themselves in a cityscape and put themselves as artists there. So they could make their own scenes, place their own characters in, and really live that moment themselves. Um, yeah, I definitely wanted to do like an urban setting just to show people how straightforward it can be and that not to be intimidated by such a scene. Because I've seen a lot of people doing landscapes and environment, and that's something I love too. But people shy away from urban settings a lot in comparison. So I was like, okay, here you go. Here's the guy, as much value as I can. So, yeah.
No, I love that. I'm definitely one of those people who shies away from cityscapes. Like I had this, I was sitting in my balcony like a few months ago, days, I don't remember, and I had this vision in my head because I live downtown, so lots of high-rise buildings, and I had this vision of a scene, or like I saw something. I was like, it gave me an idea for a painting, and then instantly I was like, oh, but the buildings, you know, I was like, I just instantly felt like, how am I gonna do this? That's so daunting. I don't draw high rise buildings, you know. There are lots of artists that I admire, like you and like Devin L. Kurtz and like Guiz that draw like these amazing like cityscapes, and I just don't know how to do that. Like, I'm very much the organic artist, the fantasy, the fairies, the leaves, the trees, the grass. But cityscapes, definitely, I'm one of those people. So I'm so grateful and thankful for people, artists like you, who, you guys kind of have mastered that, and you can like break it down, and so I don't have to go through the like tedious process of trying to understand. I can just watch how you do it and do it that way. So thank you so much. That's very, very informative. I'm sure that's going to be very helpful for lots of artists, whether beginner or intermediate, just anyone in general. I wanted to also ask what your favorite part of the creative process is. Like, you share a lot about your process online, but for you personally, what's your favorite part in general of the creative process, the entire art making process?
For sure. So my favorite part is definitely when I figure out how to make something a lot simpler than it seems to be. For example, anything that is complex, if I can figure out a way to do it in something straightforward that even like a third-hand kid could replicate for myself, that is like always like an enlightenment moment for me. It's like the apple falls on my head moment. So that is so anything like if it's for example a cityscape where you literally don't have to make it so complex, if I can figure out a way to fill it up with windows and lights and life in a simple, straightforward way, I'm happy. If I can figure out water, especially those caustics and ripples around in a simpler way, great. If I can figure out how to do rain, like for example, a hack for doing rain is fill up your screen with dots and add motion blur downwards. So that's just yeah. So, but instead of going and drawing manually rain everywhere, right? And then your one stroke is off. You're like So just fill out with those motion blur. So if I find ways to make things easy and fun, like even for myself, I always like looking at references or looking at other artists and seeing how they've done stuff. Like, for example, Devin and Ellicott, who you brought up, and even Guez, they have wonderful ways of doing that too. Like, Devin's amazing with lighting when she adds so much mood and story to her piece as well. So I look at her and I learn so much and you're like, oh, so that's how you did that. And then I want to replicate myself and be like, yeah, it works so well. So that's the thing. So yeah, to put it in a nutshell, it's if I can simplify something that seems complex, that's my most favorite point. It's not even the finished artwork; it's just that moment. It's like wow.
It's the process. I definitely think that shows through in your like process, and I'm sure that's literally what people are always amazed by watching your videos. Because when I watch your process videos, it's like you start off with this blank canvas and you do like the most basic shapes, and all of a sudden it's a cityscape, and I'm like, what? Like, it's really, it's that easy. I'm like, you can't be serious. It can't be that easy. And then I go try it. I'm like, what? Like, it's like I've been overcomplicating things my entire life. Yeah, and okay, so back to the book. I wanted to know, like, what, when you were creating your contribution, what part sparked you the most joy, or what part did you feel like, oh, this is definitely going to be very helpful?
I think the part that I was really excited about, even while drawing with it, I was like beaming with joy, was the fact that I could show how to add atmosphere to create depth. I know it sounds like a complicated thing at first, but actually, like the thing is, I made a cityscape of rows of buildings, and the thing that really tied the artwork together at the end of it was just the amount of depth that got added by adding layers of atmosphere in between. So it's literally as simple as taking any soft brush, whatever, like a soft round brush or a soft texture brush, and drawing in some clouds in between the buildings. So that itself just really helped me put out on how you can add a lot of depth to your pieces and add a lot of expanse and make your world feel a lot more expansive than what's just within the canvas by making things that exist outside it without actually showing it. So that's what I really, really enjoyed putting in. And that was really fun for me because sometimes a lot of these artworks only come together in the last 5% when you add in the final lighting or the final touch, and then it's like it brings everything together. So yeah, that was the most fun part for sure.
Definitely. I love the final details. And it also kind of, it's that moment when, sometimes during an artwork, you go through the ugly phases and you're like, is this gonna turn out nice? Is this gonna work out? Am I gonna have to call it quits halfway through? But when you get to the final, like the final lap, and you start adding those details, that contrast that make it pop, and you're like, oh, okay, all this, the hard work was worth it. This is gonna be good. This is worth it. So definitely, I think most artists can relate to that. Thank you so much for sharing your process. We're almost at the end of the interview. Real quick before I ask the last question, just to throw in a fun question right there. I was asked to ask you how to teach us how to do the thingy, the pen flip. Because, I have a video on my channel. I tried doing it and I failed. Like, I've tried. I don't know. If you can, just for funsies, just teach us how to do that thing because I have no idea. So, yeah, please, yeah, ready.
Okay, okay, I got one for you guys. Okay, so
Actually, I think it's best to use my stylus as well. So I have that up as well. Perfect. Yeah.
yeah, please don't drop it.
No, I'm gonna try my best not to. Yeah.
So one of the easiest things that can feel complex is where you can make the pen go around your thumb. Now the trick for that, by human nature, when we rotate our finger, is to drop our thumb down. So all you have to do is not drop your thumb down, and it will flip around.
Okay. Wow. I'm just not gonna try that because I saw it and I was like, that is complicated. But I'm sure. So just not drop your thumb down in what sense? I
Hold it like this and push it with your middle finger, and yours where your thumb will naturally drop. Okay, so you want to just keep it up, and it will flip. Yeah, just keep your thumb where it is. Don't move your thumb and just push with your middle finger.
I'm glad I switched over to my pen because it worked, but it's working. It's flipping. I'm getting the pen to flip. I'm just not getting it to stay on my hand. So it's gonna take a bit of time to figure it out. But I guess
Yeah, it'll take some time.
it's gonna take some time. But thank you. At least I have a general idea of what to look out for. Just make sure my thumb doesn't fall. So yeah, just a very silly question right there. But I thought it was fun for people who are curious because I've been curious. Every time you do that thing, I'm like, how does he do that? So thanks for sharing. Okay, like I said, we're already at the end of the interview. Before we go, I just want to ask what final advice do you have for aspiring artists who look up to you, artists who are like, I want to work in Disney, or I want to do my own personal work, or, what general advice do you have for artists?
So I think the biggest piece of advice that helped me structure my career to where I'm right now is being in control of my environment. So I don't mean, the thing where they say like wake up at 5 a.m. and ignore all the friends that are bad to you. I don't mean any of that. You can have all of that because everything you do adds to you as an artist, whether it's positive, negative, you get it to decide. But what I mean by is controlling your environment is by putting yourself in a position where it's kind of easier for you to reach your goals. Like for example, you guys, you may not see it on this wall because I'm still filling up this mirror here, but I put up all the artist works that inspire me on my wall in front of me so I can look at it and be inspired. That's one thing. Then what I used to do back in college, because my college didn't teach me much about art or so on, was that I would go back home after work and like after college and put on YouTube and listen to artist interviews. Quite ironic. I mean, not ironic. It's just the circle comes back.
Yeah, it's a yeah, circle comes back, right? Yeah.
I would listen to these for like hours on end. So it kind of felt like I was in the same room with them, and I'm drawing all the time and listening to them and drawing and drawing. So it felt like I'm surrounded by other artists because I didn't have too many around me all the time. And my college had a lot of freedom, so you could do whatever you want. So I used to go home and listen to these interviews, and that environment and putting that is what I've always tried to retain. So even now, even if I go to cafe, I try and meet other artists who are also drawing, so I can talk to them. Because just for example, if you listen to artist interviews and if you listen to someone who has, for example, gone to Disney and you find out more about that, you automatically now know what it took for them to get to Disney, and you can see what can apply to your life, and you can do that. So that environment change matters a lot. Even the people I surround myself with, a lot of my career changes and interest in art were because I saw someone else do something and had a conversation with them and was like, oh, like, oh, that exists, or oh, that's how you get better at drawing like people and stuff like that. So I think changing the environment for me had the biggest thing. Like even now, I have segments of my day where I either go to a cafe or I just sit without any distractions, listen to interviews, even take lessons myself. And keeping that intact has always made me feel like, okay, I'm still on the track. There's no loss of momentum. There's nothing of that. Because even if there are days where you're not creating, if you're still in that environment, it's like you don't feel that loss of momentum. You don't go into a slump. So for me, just control the environment has been the biggest factor. It's easy to say draw every day. It's easy to say things like that. But if you, again, it can get very repetitive. But if you're in an environment, a surrounding that kind of harbors you into, chasing the goals you want to chase, and then it's way easier. Because if you're surrounded by people who are drawing all the time, you'll just automatically do that. So the same thing goes with anything actually. And I don't mean cut off your friends and all that. Keep your friends, but also talk to people who are in line with what you want to do as well. I'm not saying become a lone, isolate person and draw. Okay, you need community, you need society, you need people. Art, we humans are social beings, and artists, we channel all that into our work. So definitely the environment, if you control it, so it's your desk, the people you talk to, listen to, the media you consume, um, your way you create art, and all. If you have a control over that, it's awesome. So that's like my biggest piece of advice.
That's a very good advice, actually. That's very good because, like you said, it's sometimes just being in a space where you consume art. Sometimes that's all it takes, right? You're in a slump, you just need to get up and go to a museum, and instantly you're inspired. So, definitely, I love that. That's a very good advice. Thank you so much for taking your time to have this interview. This was a lovely, wonderful conversation. I had so much fun. I'm going to keep practicing my pen flip. But, yeah, thank you so much. That was awesome.